how do you help this community? You need changes to help them with all those different issues, including provide them with food for immediate term so they don't go hungry, providing their kids with laptops, the families with Wi-Fi, getting jobs back, opening up Hong Kong, giving people jobs. But the mental health has been impacted. So what this community needs is they need people who understand their culture and their language. Because you cannot talk about the problems that stick in your heart, that pertain to your family, to your identity, with someone who does not understand your culture and your language. And so it's very important from the perspective of providing human beings with dignity and justice to give that to them.
Hello and welcome to The Game Changers, brought to you by Credit Suisse. I'm Yvonne Chan. To achieve the goals of inclusive economic growth around the world, it's critical that no gender or ethnic group is sidelined. In this episode, we look at intersectionality. It's a framework for conceptualizing a person, group of people, or social problem as affected by a number of discriminations and disadvantages. And we shine the spotlight on ethnic minorities. Many ethnic minorities are disproportionately represented among the poor and unemployed. They face obstacles created by racism and are confronted with language barriers that make it difficult to access jobs and resources for emergency relief and mental health. My guest today is a member of the ethnic minority community in Hong Kong and understands many of the particular challenges faced by this group. Ms. Shalini Mattani is the founder and the CEO of the Zubin Foundation, a think tank and charity working to improve the lives of Hong Kong's marginalized ethnic minorities. The Zubin Foundation continues to lobby for systemic change and seeks to make an impact through its many initiatives. Welcome, Shalini. It's good to have you in studio with me today. You know, we often think of Hong Kong as a multicultural, a diverse city where people from all backgrounds can thrive. Now, what is the reality on the ground and what contributes to the current challenges, if any?
Yvonne, it's great to be here with you, and just want to commend Credit Suisse for having this series. You mentioned at the beginning this issue of intersectionality, and I think if I may just take a moment to describe that. So I'm a woman and I am an ethnic minority, and that combination presents challenges in a place like Hong Kong. Now, intersectionality is important for all of us. For example, you're a woman, you're ethnically Chinese, and that might have its own issues. But for me and for ethnic minorities in Hong Kong, the issues are pertinent and they impact our everyday lives. So we often call Hong Kong Asia's world city. But actually, if you look at the data, that's not true. So only 4% of Hong Kong is made up of the non-Chinese population. And I'm using data from the Hong Kong census. And if you look at that 4% of the population, by size, the largest minority size are the whites and what we call the mixed race. Now, most of that population, when you look at their income levels and their employment levels, they do better than the average Hong Kong population. But then you look at the other minority groups, and they are the Indians, the Pakistanis, the Nepalese, etc. And these groups generally don't do as well. Now, generally in Hong Kong, when we talk about ethnic minorities in the press, in the administration, the term ethnic minority generally applies to those who are not doing very well. And so I just want to make that clear. And in terms of color, most ethnic minorities are darker skin. So this is an issue of colorism as well that we don't always talk about.
Well, thank you for highlighting some of those issues or the trends that you're seeing right now. Speaking of colorism, are the cultural and economic challenges even fairly distributed within the ethnic minority groups? What differences have you noticed?
There are huge differences between ethnicities. So for example, if we look at the Hong Kong Pakistani community, over 50% of those households would live in poverty. And that is massive. So you do find a disproportionate number of Hong Kong Pakistanis and Hong Kong Nepalese and Hong Kong Filipinos, actually, who are in what we call elementary occupations. And that's a term that's used by the government in the Hong Kong census. And it basically means more manual kind of jobs. And if we look at COVID, and I think it's important to highlight this because we are living in the time of COVID right now, what we have seen since March, April 2020 is we have seen unemployment increase in the ethnic minority community hugely. And that is because of layoffs in catering, construction, and in the airport. And the airport has really been a massive employer of ethnic minorities traditionally.
Then there is this also a common perception, like you talked about, Shalini, that people belonging to an ethnic minority are largely homogenous. But could you talk a bit about your own background then, having come from a prominent business family in Hong Kong? Were you accorded certain privileges that were extended to affluent minorities, or do you think poverty is largely the main barrier to access and equal opportunity?
I would say that my race has always been a problem in Hong Kong. I grew up in colonial Hong Kong. I went to British schools. Being brown was a bad thing. It was very much about integrating, not what we called maintaining your identity. You were really encouraged, I suppose, to become more Anglo. And that's not what diversity is about. It's really about people retaining their identity and being celebrated for their identity. But also there are issues at home. I grew up in a very conservative family. I had to fight to be educated. My parents wanted me to marry at a young age, and I had to fight to go to university and obtain the degree I did. And their view was, you're already too outspoken as a girl. Nobody's going to marry you. It was very, very hard as a younger woman, very hard, because like I said, my only purpose in life was to marry.
And that's why you're trying to effect change for other girls in the community, right? The Zubin Foundation now focuses on empowering women and girls to change the game for themselves. So what has been a defining moment for you, and how has that inspired you to effect more change?
You know, there have been so many defining moments for me at the Zubin Foundation, be it, you know, an Indian woman who was in her 30s, who had been raped a number of times and had never spoken to anyone about it, even though she's on CSSA, which is Social Security, and there's a social worker who goes to her home. The woman was from Pakistan. The man is a Hong Kong-born Pakistani. He married her. He brought her to Hong Kong. They had 2 children. She had not been out of the house in those 2 years. She only went out of the house to give birth in a hospital. Anyway, so I asked her, you say your husband left you after the first 2 children, but you have 6 children. Where did they come from? And she said he would come home from time to time and rape me. Now that whole family has received counseling. She's stronger. She has worked. She has earned income. She has talked about her problem. And when I asked her, why didn't you ever speak to the social worker about this? Her view was, how can I speak to a Chinese woman about this? Because most of the social workers are Chinese. How could I tell her that I was married to my first cousin? How could I tell her I had been raped? You know, for this woman, it would have been absolutely impossible. So counseling families actually provides opportunity to them to unburden themselves, but also create a new future for themselves and their families. And it's really precious when that happens.
As I understand that the Zubin Foundation researches the impact of systemic and societal barriers on the opportunities for young people. Do you see then too a gap between the aspirations of the ethnic minority children as well as their reality, and what sort of efforts are being put in place to bridge this gap?
So there are big problems that affect youth. I would say the two biggest ones are the acquisition of the Cantonese language and discrimination. Now, many of our youth have not learned how to read and write Chinese. They speak Cantonese brilliantly, but their reading and writing of Chinese is pretty low, and therefore they're not able to access opportunities. Discrimination affects them in school, where from kindergarten, even the government-funded kindergartens, they tend to separate the ethnic minority kids. And this is really because principals are under pressure from parents who do not want their kids to be in the same class as ethnic minority kids. Now, this discrimination feeds into primary and secondary school, feeds into the workplace. And so youth lack the genuine skills to read and write Chinese, but at the same time, they lack the inclusion into mainstream community. And if I can just give you a couple of examples, we had an intern this year who was joined with a legal firm, not a legal firm through us, but a legal firm through her school. And the firm was a local firm, a small firm, and they actually told the girl that she must not wear her hijab, which is a head covering. They told her she must not eat South Asian food. And so this girl left the internship. She felt harassed racially by this community of workers. They're older than her. We then connected her with a global law firm where she interned and didn't have a problem. But my point is that as Hong Kong people, there is no cultural sensitivity training given at school. Children are not taught we are all Hong Kong people. And actually, that's where Singapore outperforms Hong Kong tremendously. You're all called Singaporeans, whereas in Hong Kong, that is not the case. I think the youth face massive issues because of the education and because of the very high barriers of entry caused by discrimination.
That was a really illuminating insights that you just shared with us. And I want to also frame this conversation to address the impact that the pandemic has had, right? Mental health issues were really brought to the forefront, but there is a lack of awareness of the available resources for mental health for the ethnic minority community. Like the early example, which you mentioned, how the lady was unable to tell her problems to a social worker who didn't speak her native language. Now, with more companies and communities looking to support mental wellness, are there some unique challenges faced by people who belong to ethnic minority groups? I mean, what can be done to improve the situation, Shalini?
So we talked about being a woman and being a racial minority. Mm-hmm. Now, with COVID, that added many other dimensions. It added increased poverty, increased unemployment, 1.5 years of people having their kids at home, with home sizes of most of my service users about 150 to 200 square foot subdivided apartments, which is very common for our poor, and some of our families having 6 children. Lack of devices, lack of connectivity. So you have small pressure cookers where families, unemployed, 6 children in 200 square foot, you're going to see problems. And we did see problems. So I want to just frame that because any one of us would have been in that situation. So how do you help this community? You need changes to help them with all those different issues, including provide them with food for immediate term so they don't go hungry, providing their kids with laptops, the families with Wi-Fi, getting jobs back, opening up Hong Kong, giving people jobs, but the mental health has been impacted. So what this community needs, they need people who understand their culture and their language, because you cannot talk about the problems that stick in your heart, that pertain to your family, to your identity, with someone who does not understand your culture and your language. And so it's very important from the perspective of providing human beings with dignity and justice to give that to them.
So you also talk about cultural sensitivity training, right? And I wanted to be a little bit more forward-looking now. So how can we improve the employability capacity of minorities so that they can also contribute to Hong Kong community and its economy?
So one of the things I would say that we need to do is global companies in Hong Kong talk very much about diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. Now, because the ethnic minority community is so small, it's only 4%, and it's a relatively invisible community, not receiving enough media attention or coverage, we need global companies who say racial inclusion is important to start looking at this community, to start sensitizing their employees to it, but also start offering internships and paid positions to this community. And what we need is enlightened human beings to think about minorities in every community, including the community of Hong Kong.
How can we go about doing that?
We have something called the Institute of Racial Equality, where I go into firms and organizations, we go into the administration and we speak, we raise awareness, we go into local schools, we raise awareness. But I think there's nothing like others helping us. So the greatest way people can help is by talking about ethnic minorities that they've heard at this session, talk about what they've heard, and ask people to look up the Zubin Foundation, look up racial minorities, and learn more. Like I said, we think of Hong Kong as Asia's world city. And so we don't look past that. And we don't look at, well, where are the minorities? Where is the color in this posting? And these are the questions we need to ask. And I just don't think enough people are asking that.
You mentioned going to the schools, into corporates, and telling them about the racial equality in Hong Kong, the diversity list. Were the audiences that you spoke to receptive to the message that had to be shared?
I think Hong Kong people, like everyone else, are good people. But I don't think that inclusion is taught in schools. It's not debated, it's not talked about. Did they know that Hong Kong University, our greatest university, their initial endowment came from an ethnic minority? Did they know that Hong Kong Style Ferry, which is a landmark in Hong Kong, was set up by an ethnic minority? And they don't know this. They haven't been taught this. And so these are very smart people who get it. They just need to be told.
So in a nutshell then, Shalini, can you tell me what's the next biggest goal for the Zubin Foundation? What do you hope to see changing in the next few years?
It's a really good question. So for the last few years, we've really been focused on helping the ethnic minority, providing them with jobs. We have a helpline for women. We provide mentorships and internships and mental health assistance, and we will continue to do that. But I think what I have realized is we need the majority on board. And therefore, we need a concerted effort and strategy that addresses how to change the mindset of the majority. And that's really hard as a small potato, using a Hong Kong phrase. But I think we have no choice, because unless we bring the majority on board as allies, we're never going to significantly improve the lives of the minority. So if I take an example from the whole gender discrimination movement, we need male allies in the movement. We need the majority population to help us with the issues that the minority faces. So I think that is the next few years of the Zubin Foundation, helping the minorities, but bringing the majority on board with us.
Thank you, Shalini, for a really enlightening conversation and for also sharing your personal anecdotes with us today. You've helped us define some of the challenges faced by minorities in achieving economic stability, and we also looked at the compounding impact of the pandemic on this group. But more importantly, you've reiterated the benefits of diversity and inclusion for Hong Kong and highlighted what individuals and corporates can do to support inclusiveness and to increase the employability capacity of minorities. That is to find more concrete solutions to discrimination that we hope will become a lot more widespread. And this also means bringing more allies on board. So thank you very much for your insights today, Shalini.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. Thank you, Credit Suisse.
Well, you've been watching The Game Changers, brought to you by Credit Suisse. I'm Yvonne Chan. We will see you next time. Goodbye.